our focus on me and Neuro's discussion. Thank you, Jaden, my amazing mod, for putting a nice multi-link. You guys can watch from both of our points of view there, if you so wish. And you should absolutely be giving Neuro a follow and a sub and all that if you are a Zerg player, because he is the most consistent, bestest, most chill, most zen and inspirational mindset-y Zerg player out there. And also, yeah, we're gonna work on this matchup. So. Okay, let's look at your build order. Let's talk about it. What did I just... Oh my god. I just accidentally pressed something that brought up like an intro thing on the game HUD overlay where there's like this big gray bar and some red shit on my screen. Someone in chat can tell me how to get rid of that while I try... Okay, I got rid of it. Oh, did I? Yeah. There we go. Got rid of it. Sorry. Nice and organized today. I was just fixing up my hotkeys. Cool. So let's talk about your build order, and let's just kind of really focus on the document for now and really look through that. So your build: 13 Overlord, 15 or 16 Hatch, 18 Gas, 17 Pull, Super Standard, 20 Overlord, cool, 2 Queens, 2 to 4 Lings, Ling Speed, Pull 2 off Gas. I like to go 19 Overlord. I think you could technically go 21 Overlord and have it be the same efficiency as 20. Either way, this allows your Queens to be perfectly lined up. Which is totally fine. It's a tiny variation. It's not worth talking about. 30 Expo, Overlord. So you go Expo straight into Overlord, straight into third Queen, and then you go for the... Oh, do you actually build your Zerglings after the third hatch is down? You do, right? Because
no, I think I have to make 2 to 4 to be able to take the more ideal base. Okay, so I usually make Lings first.
Okay, cool. Some Zergs really like to just... They're like, no, I'll just take the other third, which I don't like. I really like to have a consistent base layout. So I think that's a good way to do it. 32 to 34 Overlord again. So another Overlord there. Okay, cool. So we maybe could squeeze another drone or two in here, but let's just look at this opening. And as always, this is something I always do as like a precursor, is hunting for an extra drone or two that we could get in the early game. And it's something I always do when I'm struggling in ZvP, because I just find... having a few more workers can often change just about everything. So let's look around here. You get that down. We get the double inject. And this... Okay, so we went third Queen here. And I think we're going to build the Overlord.
So the reasoning for that is I see your Gateway being chrono boosted. I don't know if it's the second Adept or a Stalker. And I feel like you can't really know at that point.
Yeah, so you like to have the 2 Queens kind of ready to meet out front with the Adepts as they come in, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That's kind of the idea there.
And you do build a few extra Zerglings here, going right up to 10, despite it being a Stalker. Is that something where you think you need those extra Lings? Against double Adept, I love 10 Zerglings, even 12 sometimes. Against a Stalker...
I think that might be sort of an autopilot thing, where because Stargate openings are so common, sometimes the 10 Lings for me is automatic without actually branching in the decision making. So that may be a really good spot to squeeze a lot more drones out.
Just 2 or 3 more drones. I think the Lings are really nice, but we also, I mean, normally it's around 5 minutes at earliest 4:30 when they're going out to take that third, right? I don't imagine we'd be seeing a lot of 4-minute third bases. I haven't been seeing those for a while off Stargate. So I think definitely having the Lings kind of a little bit later, just a few more drones, it's always good. I try to only go above the initial 4 Zerglings, or potentially maybe, I might go 6 or 8 if I want to surround the Adept. But I try to only go above that if they're actually going for second Adept and coming straight across that map. Now, in terms of the timings, obviously I'm going to hit you with usually the crispest possible version of the DT timing. Normally I warp in all 4 DTs at 4:37, and this is kind of like the most brutal version of it. So about 4:50 is the timing. Now you've got spores ready, but interestingly, you were going for Overlord speed here, and the Rotron wasn't quite ready. So what struck me when I watched this replay earlier was I felt like you were a little bit halfway between defending with Lings and defending with Roaches. And it felt a little bit indecisive. Personally, I always love Roaches against any sort of opening off Twilight Robo, just because if it turns out to be a weird charge all-in, it's nice. If it's a Zealot drop, it's a little bit easier to deal with. If it's an Adept timing, I like to have the Roaches as well. So for me, I'm very, very focused on like, let's just get fast Roaches every game and be decisive with that. In this case, I feel like you're a little bit halfway.
It seems like it's a lot more larva efficient of a solution. The thing that I need there, though, is the timing of the Roach Horn, because my Roach Horn just finished while the DTs are on top of my base, so that's obviously too late.
So, does your Roach Horn timing change against this opening as opposed to against Stargate, or is it usually about the same for both?
Well, that's what I was saying. My Roach Horn timing is not predictable, not reliable at all. It's like, I have a lair. Huh, I should get a Roach Horn. That's the extent of my logic there.
Cool. I think if we backtrack it, we can just come up with a very tight timing. Now, my inclination, I wrote in your document, is, well, we can just pair up the Roach Horn with the lair at like 3:50 to 4 minutes. I would say we want those even faster. So basically, let me talk through my reasoning. Basically, you're going spores and to overseers. Your overseers are slightly late, but it's kind of like we're going fast overseer to block the DTs, right? And we're kind of going for lings and we're kind of going for roaches. Whereas if we look at like a laser or Serral or someone, when they defend this DT drop, and you don't get to see a lot of this anymore in current pro play, you need to go back a while because you don't see a lot of these Archon drops. You'll often see them with the very fast lair. They'll already have an overseer morphing at this point and a little handful of roaches at the front. And they might only now be starting spore crawlers in the natural and the main, and no spore in the third. And that way they've allowed themselves to just have like the minimal defense at the front, right? It's just the roaches and the overseer, which is kind of mobile, and if the warp prism changes angle, you can kind of move over and still defend, right? You're not gonna like lose a hatch or anything. You might lose a little bit of mining time if you lose track of the prism somehow, but you should be totally fine. So I think what we can do is we can say, okay, so there's two things we need. We need detection and we need the defense. And we want to try and, yeah, we can go into the extra detection with the spores as a backup, because we obviously aren't just going to stay with one overseer. What if they warp in 4 more DTs and then hit 2 bases at once and we've got 1 overseer and a little pack of roaches? We've been a greedy idiot. But even that window of the 30 seconds there of delaying those spores, or say skipping these lings, having the roaches straight away out, I think it's going to allow us to have a more pointed response. So to do that, I think we need to choose, do we want to focus on the spores or the fast overseer for the anti-air, and choose the roaches or the zerglings for the defense? What do you choose?
Overseer and roaches. I like the overseer a lot. I think as a unit, especially if you get it early, you can usually do something funny like go for a scout and hit a robo or a forge or storm or something like that. So that seems more efficient in terms of its scaling into something offense-based. The spore solution is more of a submissive choice where it's like, okay, I'm just going to make it difficult for you to hurt me, but the spore isn't really going to do much on the Protoss side of the map unless it turns into a silly Sky Toss game.
Yeah, precisely. And I think this is really nice, right? Where, yeah, cool. Sorry, just getting distracted by what was going on in the game. So, thinking of that, we've got to refine that lair and that Roach Horn timing. So let's go back in this game, and it's got to be somewhere between probably 3 minutes 30 to 4 minutes, right? So let's try and find a trigger. So I'll just kind of let you figure out what works for you here. I'm going to be thinking about it as well. But
So one thing that would change here is I knew there was a stalker because it shot my overlord, so I would only have 4 lings that bump your wall, and I see there's a robo if I bump it all the way.
Yep.
And I could take Lair and Roach Horn basically right then. So I think that would be the trigger for it. Is the Adept goes back home, I bump the wall, I see the robo, I know it's a prism play, I drop the Lair and the Roach Horn, boom.
And I guess it would be exactly the same if you recognized a Twilight, right? So
yeah,
it'd be the same response for both. Okay, so what we'll say is as soon as we recognize it's Twilight / Robo, one or the other, or both, as in this case, we're going to immediately go Lair plus Roach Horn. And we should normally be able to figure that out quite early, and you could even almost assume off the Stalker, right? But let's imagine we don't get to see either of those. Scouting's denied, our Overlord hasn't been able to go in, all we see is a Zealot and a Stalker. We can probably assume, right? So if we're blind right now, we don't see the robo, we could potentially just say, look, it's an Adept and a Stalker. That alone tells us it's probably not Stargate. It still could be. There are some weird openings where they go Stalker and that sort of thing. But personally, I actually make this read even earlier. And it does occasionally get me in trouble. But with the Cybercore spinning or not, I immediately make the call based off that. And it also allows me time to mentally prepare myself for what game I'm in. So at this point, if I was you, I'd look at the front and say standard chrono on the gateway, and ooh, the cybercore is spinning. And I would immediately say my opponent's not playing Stargate, it's a Twilight Robo, and I would already have this as my game plan lined
Okay, so
up.
that's like 215.
Yeah, so we could add that in, and I think at the moment in the current meta, like 99% of the time at high levels where we're playing, that's gonna identify it. You'll very occasionally get someone who's being a little bit tricky and doing, they'll start it, then they'll cancel it, and then restart it. That's pretty rare, and usually you see the Robo or the Twilight, or you see a Stalker, and that's another tell of ground-based play. So I think that's good because it gets you in the right mindset. So assuming we've got that information going forward, and we've talked about, okay, cool, as soon as we recognize it, if we didn't already recognize it from that or some other means, 3 minutes 30, 3:45, 4 minutes. There's got to be somewhere in that window. If our opponent can warp in DTs at 4 minutes 40, so hit us at about 4:50, and Adepts can likewise hit us at about 4 minutes, well, technically 4 minutes 20. No one's doing that Adept timing. When I do it, I get a free win every game because no one on ladder is expecting it. They don't realize how fast Adepts can hit. That has huge tells. It's a very specific one. But with this more standard opening where you don't see the warp gate getting chrono boosted constantly, 4 minutes 50 is the danger timing, right? So what time is the latest you want a Roach Warren started for that?
What, like 4 minutes? 4:10, 4:20?
Yeah, what's in Roach Warren actual build time? I'm looking it up now. I think it's like 36 seconds, I believe, for a Roach
39 in
39? So if you started at 4 minutes, there's no way you can have Roaches out in time, even if you build them all at your third. Maybe if you can build 4 at your third base, you can barely get them out like before, you know, the base goes down or something. I mean, you probably could. So 4 minutes is the latest, right? Usually you'll barely get away with a 4 minute one.
So you might say 350 just to be safe about it.
So 350, 345, something around there is what we'll say here. So 345 to 350. So we'll try to be tight on that, and then if we're a little bit late, usually we'll get away with it. Cool. Awesome. Okay. So we just write Lair plus Roach Warren. And in terms of Zerglings, Zerglings aren't as useful, whether it's an Adept Pressure, whether it's an Archon drop, or a Charge Lot drop. So we should use our Lings to stop them taking a third at the same time, right? So whether it's just your initial 4 or you've got a full 10 or whatever, we should probably leave those at that other base unless we're really desperate and we're really behind on our tech. And we should immediately make Roaches as soon as that's out, right? So
Swarm forces under attack.
I'm kind of going to write build versus Twilight Robo here as the subheading for this. And we can just do this fully with the idea of this is versus Twilight Robo. And then we can kind of copy paste it and do it versus Stargate as well. Because I really like to think of these as separate builds. Just so that we're very distinguishing exactly which branch we're playing. Yep.
Seems good.
Now,
I think I have a couple games
Command
against
unacceptable.
Stargate.
just theory-wise, while we're thinking about it,
Has evolved.
what time do you get your Lair versus Stargate
Newly birthed
and
queen
Roach Warren? Is it
ready.
just kind of the same as what it was before? The 4 minute Lair? Okay. You're playing Roach Hydra, right? You're always going Roaches? I guess we're going to talk about that when we get to that, actually.
I do Hydroling Bane quite a bit of the time. I tend to feel like I'm more confident dealing damage to the Protoss, but I also run into a lot of situations where if it's a really good player like Raze or Disc or something, they can kind of just get beaten up for a while and then they have a critical mass of Archons and then they push across and kill me.
Yeah.
So,
So I guess it's kind of like a Queen Ling straight into Hydras, right? It's relatively fast Hydras
Forces
when we're playing against Stargate. So we play fast Hydras. How many Queens do you go up to in total against that?
Swarm
Against
forces.
Stargate?
I try to have at least 4 that are on a hotkey kind of wandering around just to also kind of give me a buffer in case it's the Phoenix meme.
Evolution
Yeah.
complete.
So you actually go up to 7 Queens as standard. Okay. And that's something which is a good safety if you're skipping the Baneling Nest and Roachwarren both. It's nice to have that as a safety. It makes you much more powerful, and you need that with your lair timing, because your lair timing is not crazy fast at 4 minutes. It's not slow, but it's not crazy fast, and you kind of need to rush your Hydras if you're playing low Queen and no Baneling Nest, no Roachwarren, right? You need to be like, well, we're beelining to Hydras, and we need to get them out and with an upgrade as quickly as possible. So 7 Queens plus fast Hydras is what we're going to be doing against Stargate. Okay, awesome. So with this branch here, you can just open up defensive roaches and then just go into your normal Hydra Bane. And I am a big fan of convergence points. So if we're going to stick with Hydra Bane, which I think you wanted to stick with, right?
Swarm forces under attack.
I'm open to using lurkers some, but I really have no idea where to push or with how much stuff. Like sometimes it ends up working out, but it doesn't really feel as directed as it should be.
Yeah, I feel like when I play against you, you kind of just go into turtle mode when you're playing lurkers. It's kind of like your let's turtle up, and the Nidus worms are the one way of making it work, but it's like a very delayed lurker attack, right? It's not like the let's go and siege up before their fourth is even established and deny that fourth and have Roach Hydra lurker swinging in from all sides. It's more of like a delayed kind of late game lurker tech that you like to go for. As you said, it's because it's not as directed, it's not as focused and all that. So, okay, cool.
Under attack.
So basically the big thing is just going to be as soon as your Roachwarren's done, you build roaches. Let's go back to rehearsing this one before we talk too much more about Stargate. Sorry, kind of getting distracted here. I should try to keep this focused. As high level a player as you are, our brain is always best when it's focused. We shouldn't just be like jumping between concepts and different branches so quickly. So let's kind of rehearse this. You go for a second and third gas, a little bit late here as well, along with this Roachwarren. So if we were to go single, say our Roachwarrens should be finished by this point. We're already building roaches. We would be able to afford 6 roaches. Maybe our 7th would be starting up now. Just kind of the bare minimum here. So I think one way to do this would be we probably want to get a second gas at the same time as the Roachwarren. And then we can add the other gases later. How do you feel about that?
Sure, that seems good. I think it was Lambo, who I kind of copied off of in this game against Showtime. He took 2 gas at 48 drones, 2 gas at his natural, because that's kind of when it started to spike with more drones and it passed minimum saturation. The difference here is he didn't make, 16 lings or whatever I did. So
he's hit that.
My gases would have been earlier if I didn't make so many lings.
And you put back on at 3:30, yeah. You put back on right on time. Cool. Okay. Yeah, so that could naturally be a little bit faster. So, I mean, in terms of game timer as well, because we do want to think in that regards. So what's the latest you want to be? Or do you want to? We can stick with the 3 gases, and that's totally fine. Well, what's the latest we want on the timing on those extra gases, though?
I think 4:15 around this point would be pretty good, because I did pass minimum saturation around that point. Yeah. And here, I think I'm just focusing on the lings and the prism. It's really fancy to look at. I'm just amazed right now instead of taking my gases. So that's more of the reason for why the gases weren't taken. I think that was a good point.
You also wrote Evo Chamber along at this time. Now, you didn't do it in this game, and I agree we shouldn't be going such a fast Evo against a ground-based player, Twilight Robo. So
yeah, the Evo decision I think would be good if it was like a depth play that was aggressively reaching for a 3rd pretty early. Whereas this, I know that there's a prism that's going to hurt me a little bit before the 3rd goes down. I could take the 3rd maybe as a reaction as soon as I get the roaches down. Because if I have the 6 roaches, I'm not going to immediately die.
So sorry, you said go for the 3rd. You mean go for the Evo once you have the roaches out?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I think that's like totally fine. I mean, we could just say when your lair finishes, you've written lair finish, roach speed, overseer, ranged attack, and overlord speed. We could just write Evo Chamber instead of ranged attack there.
Sure.
And I think that'll be a nice trigger there. It's like, okay, defend the attack, lair's done. Okay, roach speed, Evo Chamber, go for the oversphere. Now you're going overlord speed as standard as well there. And is that just for kind of continual scouting later on? Is this to bring queens across the map? I know you do some funky stuff with queens.
Well, I usually get the overlords bullied by the archons. Generally, of the Protoss players who I face, some of them will go for the Dark Templar Prism, but they usually just make them into Archons first. So
Especially
that's-
off the Oracle Phoenix, where they're going just High Templar Archives, right?
Yeah. So I think I'm just in the habit of getting the Overlord speed after I have my lair. But yeah, I agree right here. It's not a super high percentage upgrade that's really helping me in a big way. I would say I feel pretty dead at this point anyway.
Oh yeah. This game is obviously, it's like the moment the fight at the third went south, we were dead. We're really focused more on that kind of what the standard game plan would be. I feel like OV speed's not the most pointed thing to spend our money on at that stage. I think we want to like immediately make an Overseer and Scout, and you're already doing that anyway. So it's kind of like, well, the OV speed, if it's just there to pull Overlords back to safety, we can just do that, right? If we know there's going to be an Archon drop coming or there's a chance of it, we could just pull these Overlords back a little bit ahead of time when we know this is coming in. And that's something where I think as we get more confident against this pressure, we'll be better against it. And that's something where we should focus a little bit on this whole engagement. So I think we should scratch OV speed completely from the build for there. We can maybe get it later on. And we should talk a little bit about this particular pressure, right? Let's imagine we're going for those roaches. I think we still want to get an extra queen or two, or at least pull these 2 queens to the front. 2 or 3 queens to shoot the prism with the roaches. Otherwise, it can dance around. And this is something I notice is I have a lot of freedom to just dance between your bases, pick off Overlords. The roaches are often right underneath my prism, so I can't just drop, but then I just go up a cliff and drop there. And there's very few things threatening my prism, and it allows me to do so much. I almost get overwhelmed with how much freedom I have with my prism, where I'm like, I'm so tempted to almost over micro and screw up my macro, as you'll see me floating a bit of money in these scenarios. So I think just remembering, okay, we're going to get the roaches out at time, but if we can also, it could even be here at like 440 or something, grab the 2 queens, throw them on your creep queen control group, your defense key, bring them to the front, and build 2 more queens to replace them. Like they've just injected anyway. So I obviously, that's how I would do it with my mechanics. I'm not sure how you do it with your mechanics.
Yeah, mine's the same.
Same sort of method? Okay, cool. Yeah, so if you could bring those to the front.
I would probably have another queen or 2 anyway, if I didn't make those extra lings too.
I don't think you would though, because you're going for the Roach Horn in the lair so fast. If you were against Stargate, you would. 100%. Like if it was Stargate into the prism would be hitting you a minute from now at the earliest, right? That would be a much later prism, and you'd have the queens for sure either way. But against this build, I think you've got to be more focused on just number 1 drones, and number 2 get the roaches and the Overseer out. Have the 2 extra queens at the front. This will allow you to deflect it with ease, and we always want to have that, right? We want it to be like water off our back, the pressure, and we want to be almost droning as we're engaging. And that's like always the ideal. When we know we've gotten just the right amount of defense, we've not over-defended, but we've got enough defense so that we don't need to like frantically micro every single unit, like pulling back individual hurt Zerglings, so we can still have the comfort to be building Overlords and drones while defending. And that's what we were really lacking here, right? Where we did start droning during this, but we didn't put any pressure on the prism, and it was able to come forward. Where even with the Zergling defense here, remember what I was saying about how there was no threat? At this point, notice those DTs have to run backwards. But then, because there's no queens here paired up with them, and those queens could come quite far forward. If there was 2 queens here and the Zerglings were engaging the DTs right now, those DTs would probably have to emergency just pick up. You wouldn't quite kill a queen. The prism would be taking damage, and I'd have to just disengage. And the only difference here would be 1 extra queen at the front, and your Zerglings kind of coordinating with those queens just a little bit better. And that would have made all the difference here. Because the moment I've got both units taking damage at once, if I stay slightly too long, that prism goes down very quickly to 2 queens, and those DTs, if they get surrounded, die very quickly to lings. So if I'm like, a lot of the time I'll just tap out, like, ooh, just pick up and get out of there. And it'll be the same situation with roaches and queens. I've just got to, just pick up and leave, get out of there. So that should make this defense so much more comfortable. And that should also make you more comfortable with then spreading creep out to protect these Overlords. Like, these Overlords were already in a pretty defensible stance, but because you don't end up having the queens, I can often come back in and just pick off Overlords for free, right? And I'm actually even able to do that even with OV speed, but that's just because this game went sour. But normally, I think your Overlord pattern's fine. I don't think you'll suffer at all without Overlord speed. Once or twice, you can pull back an Overlord ahead of time if they're a bit too far in the open. But other than that, we don't need Overlord speed, and that should be really nice for our efficiency, right? We want to get all that money going towards the next step and the things that are really going to help us out here. So let's hop out of this game. We've talked enough now about that, and I've already got a good idea of the two different branches and how they're defined. So host up another replay against Stargate, and we can kind of look through that one. And I'm just thinking if there's any other really important points here on kind of what we want to do next. So I'm actually going to separate your build a little bit while you find that. And I'm going to say if we just go Hydra Bane and we stick with that, we don't want Roach Speed. So if we go Hydra Bane, no Roach Speed, I guess you go melee upgrades, right? You can control this replay, by the way. I'll let you steer me through it if you just start it up. So you just go +1 melee, +2. Yeah, so no Roach Speed. Obviously, we go melee upgrades and all that sort of stuff. The other focus I would probably give you is I think we should be very layer tech focused in terms of trying to win the game or gain a big advantage. And you can kind of think of that as like a step on your learning progress, right? Where it's like, get really good at the early game and your two branches against Stargate and against Ground. Get really good at then leveraging that just into a very decisive, whether it be a push to deny their fourth, which is one of my favorite things to do, you know, but with a bit of multi-prong and just kind of overwhelming with non-stop layer units. And then once you're really comfortable with that, start doing more of the, oh, you know what? This guy's like really camping on 3 bases. Let's go straight to Hive and Infestation Pit, or whatever the reasoning is that kind of pushes you straight to that Hive tech. Maybe you're against people who are massing Storm and cannons and batteries, and you're really not, you're like, okay, I think if I just go fast Broodlords, people are over-investing in static, and that can make sense. But I think when we're first improving, we don't want to be dragging our games out that long, because it makes all of the little details get lost in this long 20-minute drawn-out game, whereas we would like most of our games to be decided in 11, at most 12 minutes, maybe 13 minutes. And that's going to allow you to get more games in and more focus on those tiny details, which should allow you to just get your confidence to the next level in the early game and often just win with being super crisp at that stage of the game, right? We want to be super, super focused on those valuable early details rather than getting lost in a longer game.
Birth successful.
Yeah. I agree. I felt like my early game was kind of a mess, which if the early game gets tightened up quite a bit, then the mid game should be a lot stronger.
Yep, exactly.
So I see Adept here. I'm taking my third at a pretty normal time, second queen from the natural. And I
would
think I
normally have
messed
4
up.
wings there, right? Because that was a real bit of chaos there, I think.
Yeah, I think I made 2 this time.
Swarm has evolved.
It's one of those things where I heard that Elaser did this sometimes, so I just randomly did it. Wow. Sometimes you get away with it, sometimes you die.
Yeah, I am like the hater of variations like that. I'm like, nope, always have 4 lings, because too many games, even if you defend it okay, and you're like, hey, I did it all right, and then your supply blocked on 44. Like, oh god, because you've just spent extra APM, and I just don't like giving my opponent the opportunity to pull me around for free. And I think, like, you know, 2 extra Zerglings just makes your life so much easier when you're playing at a skill level that's not a laser's skill level. I think we want to give ourselves just a little bit more room for error in those situations.
So this early game is a bit more efficient compared to our game. I didn't overmake lings. I have presence at the third. I'm droning up. I'm generally a lot more comfortable against a Stargate opening. I think it's more consistent in what it is. If you have a Prism opening, it could be Zealots, Adepts, DTs, High Templar, who knows. Whereas this, it's like some combination of Oracle and Phoenix, and Queens are the way.
So I want to focus you here, and you can walk through it, on Spore Crawlers. When do they go down? Why do they go down? So let's go right back to your very first Overlord Scout. Remember what we were talking about? So go back to 2 minutes. with checking the cybercore for whether or not it's spinning. Is that something you're in the practice of checking for, or are you just not?
No, not really.
So in
That
this
hasn't
game,
really been on my radar too much.
yeah, I think this just helps you mentally prepare so much.
Yeah,
Because you can see
2:15
the-
is the time that we put down. And it's just finishing here. And we see it's not started.
Yeah, basically,
Wow.
because the adept's not building yet, we kind of want to wait for the adept, and then it's like, oh, it's still not spinning. Okay, so maybe 220 sometimes just seems to have done this slightly later than what we saw in the previous replay. But yeah, either way, it's not spinning. Stargate first. Now, I actually am a big fan of sending my Overlord in because I like to scout if it's Phoenix or Oracle first, and this is totally a choice thing, right? You're obviously not scouting for that, so you have more of a, well, the Overlord's a little bit further back, gives me a bit more vision of what the Adepts are doing. So do you have like a spore crawler timing locked in? Talk me through like your spores and what you're scouting for, and kind of, does it adjust or is it always the same?
Yeah, usually I'm thinking in terms of where my drones are the most concentrated and where my queens are. So I'll try to do one spore in the main at around 335 with one queen to assist. And then at that point, I usually have two queens at the natural. So I'll delay the spore at the natural a bit longer and then try to see where the oracle's going. So two queens is fine, or one queen and one spore is fine. And then spore at the third kind of as it finishes and I'm getting workers over there, and then I'll get a queen over.
Complete.
Yeah.
But I'm prioritizing the first two bases above the third base in terms of checking off defense.
Okay, so let's look at it. In this game, it was right on 335 in the main, and it turns out because he went Phoenix first, that's a long time before we needed it, which is why I'm a big fan of trying to skip out on that, but where if we sacrificed that Overlord, we would have been able to. So that's where we're going to have to make a value judgment. We also go for a 345, roughly, spore in the natural, so a relatively early one. So one thing I'm noticing here is we do take a little while to kind of overtake the Protoss in workers, right? Disc is playing a really smooth macro opening, not even continuing to build gateway units here, just a single adept, right? Really beelining on that. We go straight for the spore in our third, and at this point, the Oracle has actually exerted zero pressure. It's only just about to exert its first bit of pressure here right now. So I'm going to basically look for any corners we can cut there. And it actually, ooh, it gets 3 lava. Oh, that's a pain, actually. That is a pain, losing 3 lava to the Oracle. So is that something you ever try to focus yourself on, spending that lava before it comes in?
Yeah, I would say if I'm in kind of an A game mode, then I'm paying more attention to that, and you can spend it and they can't kill the eggs.
Yeah. Spore slash spore defense timing. So so let's go back and talk about that Overlord Scout. So your Overlord Scout ended up going back in. So what was your focus with that Overlord? And do you think you gained more value out of keeping it down the front? Do you think maybe you want to just send it in the main, and if they build a Stalker, you just cop it, it goes down? Because I feel like if I've seen the core not spinning, maybe it's worth just sending the Overlord in. That's my choice at the moment in the current meta.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it was kind of a lazy, I don't want to lose it to a Stalker, but if it's a Phoenix, it's going to die anyway. And when I'm in a better state, I'll say something to the stream like, my Overlord is brave, it would prefer to die on its own terms than to just be killed by a Phoenix when it's just wandering on the map. Same thing with versus Terran, where sometimes they'll make one Marine and then push you away, and then I'll just kind of pick a time and just go in the main, because they pretty often go for a Viking or something that's going to kill it. So might as well see something nice before it dies.
And if we do see, so we're going to start doing that, that's going to be nice. So this is your, if we look at your document, I've written spore defense timing kind of below the build on the next page, at the top of page 3. So what I'm now writing is I'm starting to organize that. Your default you were doing before should be our Oracle first variation, right? But Phoenix first, we can delay all that, right? We can delay the, so what time should we do that? It's probably about 20 seconds. So maybe 3:55, maybe just 4 minutes for the first spore crawlers against an Oracle. What do you think? Against Phoenix first?
If I have two queens at a base, then I don't need it then. But I guess there is the zappy meme where they pick up the queen and then zap the worker line. So 4 minutes is probably good.
Okay,
be
yeah. So
covered
we should
against
probably
that.
just go all 3, I guess, right? At that timing. So 4 minutes, all 3 spores, and we can check that in game. Let's go check 4 minutes. Is your third base finished then? I think it should just be finished at 4 minutes. So we should be able to drop spores at that timing. Yeah. Cool. And that actually makes a significant amount of difference in our income, right? Because you can see in this game how many lava we've got stacked up, which could all be going into drones just a little bit quicker. There's often 3 to 6 lava throughout this early stage, and just a few extra seconds on those drones being out faster just changes the entire momentum, right? So if we can just like get hyper focused on these details, these are going to make everything else in the game easier and more decisive. So 4 minutes, all 3 spores will go down. If it's Phoenix first, awesome. That's going to give you a big boost on that.
Under direct assault.
Other than that, looking at this game, so you've just got a couple Zerglings out, right? Now, do you like to get a slightly bigger pack of Lings to deny the third, or like snipe the probe when it comes out? Do you just kind of say, no, just, you know, the couple Zerglings I have out, if they deny it or delay it, that's good, but I'm not going to like build extra Lings for it. I'm going to focus more on the drones. What's your preferred default?
That's kind of how jacked in I am. I think the less commentary I give, the more I'm going to try to go fishing for the probe that goes toward the third.
Yeah.
So getting 8 to 10 Lings, and sometimes killing the probe 2 to 3 times, you effectively force an all-in out of the Protoss, which is pretty cool. But
Awesome. What sort of timing do you think we should probably build those Lings? I guess around the same timing the lair starts, like around that 4 minute timing when the spores and stuff are going down? Or
Swarm forces under attack.
let's see when it was dropped, because it usually gets dropped by like 4:45 to 5 minutes, right? For pretty usual
yeah.
time. So that would be like what, 4:40 to 4:30 for making a few extra Lings. And this is specifically for this Stargate scenario, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I've written it
Actually,
opposite.
a funny thing to do that kind of lines up with the situation here is maybe getting some of the Lings from the third base, from this larva here, if we want to like really maximize the efficiency.
Oh yeah, make sure they rally faster as well. Yeah,
Yeah, that could be
and
kind of cool.
absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't think it matters too much where you build them from, obviously, as long as we spend that lava on something. But yeah, it would have been really nice just to have a few more Zerglings, right? So it's up to you, but I would like you to choose probably like a default that you try to go to as standard every game. Most games, obviously, it will vary a little bit, but I've written just option add 6 to 16 Lings at 4 minutes, and I'll just make it add. I'll add 6 to 10. We'll write there, right? Does that sound like a good number? We're probably not going to go higher than that usually, right? That's like enough to like, if we go 10 extra Lings, 14 Lings, that's enough to like really kill 2 or 3 probes going for the third, keep them occupied. But any more than that starts to get the game into a really weird place. So I think that's a good way to think about it. So now we've focused on 2 hyper-focused details. Number 1, the spore timing. Number 2, that. Play it from here and let's just kind of look at the rest of the flow, because that doesn't change your strategy or your order that much. It's just details to try to delay your opponent with the Lings, number 1. Number 2, get yourself slightly further ahead in drones by delaying those spore crawlers as much as possible. So Baneling Nest is the next thing that just went down. Is there, you said it's very random.
The
Let's
Baneling
reason it
Nest.
out.
So for me here, a lot of times they'll go for some Stargate thing, but they will have maybe another gateway or 2 in the back, and sometimes they sneak in glaives or something and I don't necessarily see it, and then 7 or 9 adepts or something show up and really catches me off guard and I just die. So I think the Baneling Nest was kind of related to that. I also kind of think of it in terms of against a Phoenix situation, a lot of times you can get Lings across the map and then bust whenever they're trying to harass you, and that's a way to leverage some gas offensively and then get Lings inside of the base, and they really don't have the tools to deal with that if they're going double Stargate Phoenix. I think that's what ends up happening this game, but I just think of right now the Baneling Nest versus the Hydra Den. The Hydra Den is probably better for stabilizing defensively, but sometimes the Bane Nest can give you some options on offense.
Cool. So I think the main one is the defense there, though, right? Like, definitely there are situations where using it offensively can be really nice. It creates a very wild game. doing that sort of counter buffs, and it's something we don't really want to focus on too much because it's something I think you can kind of, figure out in your own games where you're doing that, and it's going to create a big variance, right? In terms of exactly all the little details are going to change everything so much. But let's talk more about what you initially said, which is the Glaive Adept follow-up. And I agree, that's the one thing you really don't want to just be building Lings and Queens against Glaive Adepts coming in with the 2 Oracles and the Adept or whatever it is, right? Sorry, the 2 Oracles and the Phoenix. What time does that hit? I honestly don't know off the top of my head. I haven't played against it in a little while. I have some estimates. When do you think that hits? Because that should really inform our decision as to when we're going for the Baneling Nest.
I think it's like 5 minutes, but this is one of the cases where they take the Stargate before Warpgate research, so it might be a little bit later if they do that. Maybe not, because it's timed with the glaives, and Warpgate and glaives take about the same amount of time.
Yeah, Warpgate's always the Warpgate timing won't really factor into it, because that finishes at, even in this case, 4:35 or 4:40, even if it's delayed 10 seconds or however long for the fastest Stargate. And it's never going to be hitting that early. Like 5 minutes, I would say, is the absolute earliest this would ever hit. I would imagine you'd be looking at a 5 minutes 30 sort of timing. So I've written that with a squiggly line in front of it, and you can work on that. You as you actually run into that, we should be recording that, right? Every time we see a threatening thing, we should always be loading up the replay and kind of going, wait, when did that hit me? Because that just helps us be so much better prepared for it, right? So the Glaive Adept follow-up hitting at 5:30. What time do you want your Baneling Nest down if we think that's a threat?
Newly birthed queen.
Baneling Nest is 43 seconds.
Exhausted.
So
Queen birth success.
maybe like 4:30.
Okay, 4:30 we've written. Cool, so 4-minute 30 Bane Nest as standard, I think is totally okay and we could get away with that. However, because you are building extra Queens and Lings, if we can skip it, that would be great, right? So we get bonus points for skipping the Baneling Nest. So something, I mean, how can we do that? Poking with Lings a lot to verify it. Most of the time they'll show the extra Adepts. People are pretty bad at hiding. Okay, that's not reliable, but it's an option. And if you realize, hey, 90% of the time I'm spotting the extra Adepts, and then I'll put the Baneling Nest down reactively, that works in 90% of my games, let's do it, right? If it's got a high percentage chance, people are being lazy, let's adjust to the meta. Let's not play assuming our opponents are going to play perfect, because that's a bad mindset to get in StarCraft, right? We expect perfect play, we're going to stop taking advantage of imperfect play. Something we all fall into once in a while. We say, well, and they can just hide those Adepts behind the wall. Yeah, if they're not doing it though, they're not going to. So poking with Lings a lot to verify can be really nice. Not just that, but threatening to cancel on the 3rd can buy more time as well, right? So both of those could potentially be nice ways of dealing with it. Technically as well, because you're a 7 Queen, man, you should be able to defend with Queen Zergling. You don't necessarily need Banelings. You want them, 100%. We maybe could get away without it as well, or just defend with Queen Ling, question mark. Okay, cool, so maybe we can do that as well. All right, awesome. So that's nice because we've now defined it, right? And I think that's the most important thing. Even if this turns out to be something you adjust that reasoning on, I think you've got to be like, okay, anything we're indefinite on, we need to just make a firm decision, because until we have a firm decision, we're slowing down our own improvement, right? And that's what you kind of have had happen, where because you've started to randomize things, you're not hitting those consistent situations, and you've started to kind of lose confidence and be unsure of what you should be focusing on in some scenarios. At least that's my interpretation. You reckon that's kind of like on the money, or?
Yeah, for sure. I think I've improved in my analysis and review of pro games, but it's going to be different pro players on different maps against different opponents in different scenarios, and it's not a cohesive picture at this point, which kind of means I'm going to be pulling a bunch of random ideas in any given match rather than kind of building my personal understanding of how I want to be crushing a matchup. Because that's how we first hit GM, right? Was you get one style and you go from the 0 point where the match starts to the late game, and you try to make everything really crisp and everything kind of leads into the next thing. Yeah, exactly. Rather than, now I'm gonna do this. Or now I'm gonna do this.
And lacks the structure, doesn't it? It's one of those things. It's funny, right? Because it's very good. You're very aware of that, because that's the most important part always, is being aware of where we're kind of looking at things in a bit of a tilted way, or you're almost overwhelming yourself by looking at all these cool things pros are doing, but it's lacking the baseline. The term I always use a lot in the last few months, because I think it is very non-jargon to understand what is a baseline. It's what we have underneath everything, right? It's what we go to no matter what else is happening in our default. So hopefully after today, you can be watching Cyril crush some ZvP tomorrow, and you're going to see this really cute thing where the queen moves to the main base, intercepts that oracle, gets 2 extra hits off, and that denies the drone dying to the first oracle or something. You're going to be like, wow, that's a really sick detail. And you're going to just immediately be able to add that into your play, right? But there's going to be other ones you're like, oh, this is a really cool thing he did, where he got the muta swap against a proxy Stargate, and then he activated the Immortal Shields and came in with the Roach Bust. Oh, this was super cool. But then you go, wait, this doesn't really fit with my playstyle at all. I'm not confident with mutas. I'm working on a new style with Hydra Bane. I don't care if mutas happens to be the right call, or a very good call in that situation. I suck at playing mutas and roaches. I'm just not used to that. I don't know how to play that. We're going to put that one in the back of our mind and not really apply it right now, right? But then we see a cool thing from Lambo. He shuts down a certain attack with a thing. We're like, okay, cool. So we can add that reaction into our play. We see that attack coming. We can do the same thing he just did. And it just gives us that baseline where we can pick and choose what we want to add in, and we can do it in a very, very digestible way, right? Small little bite-sized chunks rather than trying to eat the entire meal or pick up all the fancy little pieces from our pro players we're studying at once. And that way we should be able to progress a lot better. So obviously we're kind of ignoring the game in front of us, which is good, because I feel like we're a bit behind, quite all game long essentially, right? So let's go back to maybe one of those earlier points in this one, and like maybe around 5 minutes or something, or 4:30. And let's talk about that just a little bit more. So the Baneling Nest, I think went down about the right time when it normally would. But let's really refine that extra queen production. And that's something I'm struggling to define in my own Queen Zergling into Hydra play. And I feel like it's something you're probably going to be quite loose on. So
Yeah.
do we have these queens really well defined? I mean, I see you've added in a few extra queens already, and the Evo and the Baneling Nest, but it's all kind of come at the cost of our work account a little bit. Whereas often when I watch pro play, I do see them just rush to 60 drones and have this third mineral line fully saturated so early against Stargate. And this is just kind of me thinking, okay, maybe we need to just refine things a little bit more here, put a bit more focus into the drones sometimes, or figure out when these queens are coming out. So looking at your build order, I don't see any markers for those extra queens, so let's try and figure some out. Exact timings for 4th queen, 5th queen, 6th queen, 7th queen. And we can always go to those 6 or 7 queens every game, right?
Seems good.
All right, so I'll let you take the reins on this one. Whether it's steering through the replay or going off the top of your head. Just yeah.
The lair is one kind of point that is going to be pretty consistent, where that's going down and you obviously can't make a queen there, but
yeah.
the thing that's going to allow you to make queens is supply management. So we can assume that instead of being lazy with this overlord, he died courageously and saw that it was going to be Phoenix into Oracle or whatever. So that overlord is dead, and I've already compensated by making a couple overlords at home. So it seems like right around this point, like 38 to 40 workers, the 2 base mineral is coming online. 3rd is coming up. I agree that if you delay the queens a little bit and you spend the larva, then you're going to have more income and you can explode with queens once the lair is done and make one from every base. So that might be a pretty cool idea, is when the lair finishes, you make 3 additional queens.
That could be a good timing. I like the sound of that, because we do see a lot of this idle lava, right? And we've talked about how we can combat it in a few other ways as well, with delaying the spores, but it wouldn't combat everything, delaying 1 or 2 spore crawlers by a little bit, right? If we delay the queens as well, that suddenly leads to this whole units tab, which I've got open most of the time, by the way, when we're looking through this.
Yeah,
That lava count being 0 or 1 the entire time, rather than being 3, 4, 5, which is where it's usually bouncing around in this early game. So I really like that timing. Do you think you'd already have a fast 4th queen out, or you'd play it really minimalistic with just the 3 queens and then go for 3 extra queens all at once? I think both are valid. It's just a personal choice. What do you like?
I think the 4th being out could be nice, just because that allows me to have one that's working on the creep spread consistently, and then the other ones are constantly injecting. And then you have the next round of 3, which would complete the set of 4. It's like 4 queens is a really nice mobile unit to just have running around your bases defending whatever is an issue. And then having the other 3 disciplined. I think one of the main issues with my play a lot of times is I'll compromise my inject queens, and they'll just be running around with the creep queens, and then my production is just screwed.
Yeah. Okay,
So
cool.
Yeah.
So when does that 4th queen start up? So we want to put that in the build.
So the 4th queen, I'm making my 3rd queen at the natural pretty soon after my first 2 queens. Looks like the 4th queen's here at like 345. But
Cool. Yeah.
maybe let's look at the money and see if maybe I could have drawn a bit more. So I
These
have
are the
5 lever right
details.
now.
Beautiful, beautiful details.
Ready. Evolution complete.
Yeah, I am at 0, 1 larva. So I think having one right around 340 is pretty reasonable, because I did spend the money and I had some overlords cooking up.
Okay, cool. So we'll just say about 340. 4th queen. Awesome. Okay. So this is good because now it's just set in stone, right? Define and refine, another big saying I've been spamming lately to people I'm coaching, as well as to myself whenever I get sloppy, which with StarCraft, let's face it, we all get sloppy on a daily basis. Even when we know what we should be doing, we're not always disciplined enough to apply what we should be doing to fix our play or to be better with our play. So define and refine for anyone watching on our streams. So the big idea is we want to be more exact. And people often say, I'm stuck in Gold League. How can I improve, Neuro? Or I'm stuck in Diamond. How can I improve, Pig? And people will ask us these questions in Twitch chat, and we'll often ask ourselves, well, I've been stuck at 5400 MMR with this race forever. And it's always a matter of there are 1,000 details we can choose to improve on in a StarCraft match. And it's actually not hard to find things to improve. What's hard is decisively choosing things to improve and having the confidence to go with what we think is the right thing, and often making mistakes along the way and sometimes doing something that's less efficient. But it's so important because the moment we define exactly what we're focusing on, it allows us to focus on refining that and executing better. Whereas the moment we're unsure, indecision enters our play and we lose a game and we start questioning not just the how, but also the why. We start questioning, did I just execute it wrong? No. Did I do the wrong strategy? We're not sure. Are we looking at refinement, or are we looking at should we be doing something different? Because we haven't made our mind up on what we're really working on, and it kind of slows down our focus in terms of how we can improve. So one of the most powerful things in any strategy game, but especially StarCraft, is your own ability and developing the ability to confidently make choices and stick with them and play them out and see where they go, because that provides the opportunity for learning, right? And this is something we, even at a very high level, have to struggle with a lot, especially when we're streamers like Neuro and myself, where sometimes we get tempted to not focus on being, we want to have variance, we want to do different things every game. We want to show you guys some cool variety of plays, and sometimes we distract ourselves from, hey, wait a second, look, I'm in a really big downward spiral, or I'm in a negative place in X matchup, I just can't beat Terran, or in this case, Protoss. And we sometimes need to just kind of go back to basics, and we find that once we really define exactly what we want to do, our execution over just a few days of playing picks up dramatically, and that allows us then to start focusing on adding in the more fancy things and the variations. But it always comes from a well-defined and a solid baseline, and that's the one thing that we as players need to be disciplined in, making sure we're always working on it, always trying to improve that baseline and go back to it whenever we have problems in a matchup and
Mutation complete.
ask questions. So what questions have we been asking? Are those spores going down as late as they could be. We always want things at the last possible second. When exactly does the Baneling nest go down? We don't know. Ooh, that's a lack of definition. We don't know. Bam! Immediately something to hone in on. That's what we've done here. We said, okay, we're going how many queens each game? Ooh, is it 7? Yeah, usually it's 7. Okay, when do we get them? It's a bit undefined. We've been feeling it out. We've been doing it by feel. And whenever we play by feel, we want to kind of say, okay, well, we can probably define that better. And that's kind of what we're doing here. And I feel like already we're getting a much more fleshed out picture of kind of what should be happening at each stage. And we can add more details and fancy things off the back of that. A couple of very quick shout outs before I forget. Thank you so much, Colton, Kale, WD with the tier 1 sub, Dr. Lovestrong also with the Twitch Prime sub. Thank you guys. Neuro, you got any shout outs you want to do quickly before we hop back into this?
Neuro, can you please do some Burrowed Infestor harass next game?
I love that desire of seeing funny stuff, and I think that's
Mineral field.
you can play StarCraft to really crush a matchup, and you can also play StarCraft for StarCraft Reddit karma.
Exactly.
And I tend to kind of fall into that adventure pretty often, and I think it's a very noble thing to do. But
I think it's awesome.
It should be balanced, right? Because you have your Star Lord and your main account, so having a more clear distinction between what I'm trying to accomplish of memes or MMRs.
Yeah.
You can't usually focus on both, but it seems like the main thing that when a lot of people ask about stuff like how do I increase my APM, it's indecision. It's milliseconds of indecision, and we even see this all over this replay. If I focus hard enough on it, it makes me want to vomit. But just looking at the idle larva and how idle larva indicates that I'm being indecisive or I'm tunnel visioned or both. So that's kind of like stages in the game where I need to know from a neutral perspective, in general, what is my priority in this phase of the game. Because it's a third base Stargate, we can say that this is a safe droning time. And this is actually when I'm trying to Zerg the crap out of the Protoss, because Protoss gets their power spike of 2 base saturation really fast because they have chrono. But when we have 3 bases injected, that's when we're trying to spike up to 3 base mineral really fast. And I'm kind of losing sight of that opportunity for Zerg. Like, I'm going to be a little bit supply blocked, and I have 11 larvae right now, which is a ton. But that should all be drones at this point. Because I have the melee that's going, I have injects that are going. The larvae should go into the drones. That should be like the biggest point of urgency.
Yeah, I think that's really good, right? And we've, it's a step-by-step thing where there's a lot of things which you coming into today said, well, I'm a bit random with my Roach Warren timing. I'm a bit random with my Baneling Nest, with my Lurkaden, with my Hydroden. And as we've ironed those out, it's easier as well to just focus on these refinement and details where we say, oh, there's glaring mechanical problems. And we don't look at this and say, Neuro, you need to spend your lava better. That's it's not it. It's, as you said, it's about being more decisive. It's about not, okay, why are you floating 1,500 minerals? It's often because it's not, oh, you're bad at spending your money. It's maybe we need a clearer game plan. We need to map out this situation better, that sort of thing. Let's talk about the spore crawlers. Do you always build 3 spores versus Phoenix, or is this kind of because things went a bit awry?
This is mainly because I felt like I lost my momentum of building queen count. Because obviously if you start out with a nice heavy queen count and you identify that its Phoenix is pretty fast, you could probably manage with, like, say, 2 at the third, and then I have 1 to protect this transfer, and then maybe even 1 to 2 at the natural, and then maybe 1 to protect the transfer, and then 1 to 2 in the main. So definitely that could be an area where fewer spores can go down. Yeah. This was kind of like, I lost 2 queens here, I lost 2 queens there, and this is my way of saying, well, spore is my answer to the Phoenixes now, because I lost my queens.
It's kind of, yeah, I think definitely a maximum of 2, even if we're behind. What I often do when I'm behind against Phoenix is I abandon the queen production, and I just say, nah, it's too late. And I often end up in this scenario because I'm not that great against the Phoenix builds, to be honest. Because I forget it's an option sometimes. I just don't get enough practice against it, so I've never really fully gotten in my rhythm against it. And What I'll do though, if I lose the momentum, is I'll actually say, oh no, just 2 spores per mineral line, the couple of connecting ones, you know, as you mentioned, to protect the rallies, but also to just stop them hovering between your bases. And it allows your queens to move from one base to the next to support each other. Otherwise, they can just go sit over a single spore crawler, pick up 15 drones, kill it while there's 1 queen and 1 spore hitting them. And they're like, yeah, 1 phoenix for 15 drones, I'll take that trade any day, you know? So, I actually focus harder on my droning, and I kind of focus on the fact that the Phoenix can only kill so many drones in general, and just like, just hold down the drone key, and eventually I'll be able to build 20 Hydras at once, and then I'm back in control of the game, I hope. But at that point, things have already gone kind of bad, right? So it's what's the better of the bad choices, essentially. So yeah, definitely I think the 3rd spore in each mineral line is not necessarily the greatest, but we can imagine this game going differently now. And this is something I like to do after going through all those changes is, you already mentioned it, we could have that 3rd saturated earlier. We could have, bam, all 3 queens come down after that lair finishes. We start those extra queens. We've got a couple of lings which actually successfully snipe the probe going to the 3rd. And really just put a dent in him getting that 3rd as fast. But behind it, what are we doing? We've got more drones. We're going up probably into Hydra Den pretty much as fast as possible, I would imagine. I would probably always be aiming for a Hydra Den, not necessarily the moment the lair finishes, but as soon as we've kind of stabilized and we are starting to kind of take our gases. And I'm still a bit unsure on exactly when you put down the Hydra Den timing. I'm almost okay for you to be a little bit loose on it based on how the game's going. So I don't think we need to necessarily set it in stone just yet. If you can think of a good trigger for yourself, do it. But I'm not going to suggest one because I think it's kind of more of a personal choice based on your own feeling of how these stages line up. I think what's important though is definitely Hydra upgrades take precedence over Baneling speed, because Baneling speed is more of an aggressive upgrade. It can stop attacks, but I think we were just in a scrappy situation here. We were just trying to do a lot of different things at once, and we were hoping, you know, the Banelings would hit the mineral lines and get us back in the game and that sort of stuff. So I don't think this is by anything a standard game we can draw too many conclusions from. But it's kind of nice to think about how this game could look differently, where we could just delay the 3rd a bit, get 3 bases of saturation up, start pumping Hydras, have the upgrades rolling, and we'd be pushing with that Hydra Bane just as Psystorm's getting on the field. We're coming in from multiple angles. We've got a big drone economy, that sort of stuff. Because I want you to focus hard on breaking them as they're taking the 4th. Essentially, that sort of rough period in the game. Sometimes the 4th is up because they went for it very fast. Sometimes they're just trying to secure it. What do you think is the work account we want to exist in on this sort of training wheels phase of learning these new openings? Remember I was saying I want you to stop at don't go to Hive and basically just try to win it there? So
I think for a general saturation amount that I could do pretty much on every map, having around 70 could be fairly good. Like going up to 80 is nice because you have the ability to remax really fast, but I think on some of the more aggressive maps, and especially against the style where they delay their gases, if you go up to 80 you just die to zealots.
Yeah, I definitely think if we don't have confirmation they're playing a macro game, 80 drones is madness. But it's also something where, because we want to be aggressively focused, I think 70 drones, 6 gases seems like a pretty good choice. Obviously, if your gas is a bit low, you can always add a 7th gas on the 4th base. But I think that's a good middle ground where if the game drags on, you can always squeeze another 10, 12 drones in, right? If the game's like you're doing damage, but they've still got a good amount of storm, so you can't really kill them, like that sort of game. I think 70 though is a good kind of point where we're going to get the push going early, and sometimes if our early game's been good, we're just going to kill them. Their storm's not even done. Bam, we just kill them with Hydra Bane. Wow, easiest win ever. Or we come in from 3 or 4 sides, they've only got 2 or 3 storms. Oh wow, we just cleared out like all the probes on the 3rd and killed the 4th base. Ah, easy. This is really simple to finish the game from here. This is not hard at all. And I think we want there to be more of those sort of games, right? Not every game should be a long drawn out slugfest. Sometimes we should just win because we played so many of these details so well in the early stages. And that should be sort of the change we're looking to get out of all these adjustments. So I think a lot of 70 drone games, be stiff with yourself in the next week or two, stop at that work account, and commit to big decisive attacks. And that also allows you to absolve yourself of feeling like an idiot when you lose. You attack in, they have too much stuff. Was attacking off 70 drones the right call? No. but that's fine because it leads us more directly to the conclusion which we made, which is we fucked up the early game. Let's do that better. And let's not worry about a couple of lost MMR points or one attack, which wasn't technically the highest percentage way of winning, because we're looking at long-term higher percentages. We don't want to get caught up in what is the perfect decision-making in every game. We want to give ourselves a practice environment. So thinking of ladder, especially with ZvP, as practice for the next week or so, and then once you've got your rhythm underneath you, start branching out. Get those Reddit memes going again. Do the nice opening, get your queens out, and then start popping banelings into people's bases out of Nidus Worms and dropping banelings in from the flanks, all that sort of stuff. My personal favorite, by the way, when they go 2-star Phoenix, they're never looking for baneling drops. So if you're on everyone's camera, I'll send 5 Zerglings and an Overlord there, 5 Zerglings and an Overlord there. 3 Banelings into the Overlord first, followed by 2 Zerglings for the one-hit finishing blow, as I'm sure you know about. And then basically just send them in both flanks while distracting at the front. I'm not really committing to the attack on the front. I'm just looking to kind of show my army up and be like, hey, here's Hydras and stuff. Look at me. And have
Pretending
those queued
to
up.
be stupid.
Basically, yeah. And then bam, bam, 2 mineral lines blow up at the same time. And you go, wee, I'm way ahead. So that's one of my favorite memes we don't see enough of lately, I think, is Baneling drops. They've just gone out of the meta. And whenever something's out of the meta, people will suck against them. Okay, you are already doing them a lot.
Some of my paths are fairly predictable, and I don't often think about adding the distraction with it, which I think makes it a little bit easier for the Protoss to focus on. That might be something, like we've covered quite a bit, and I think fixing my early game and powering up to a strong mid game is going to be the more like high percentage choice for learning the matchup. But if we do sessions like further down the road, that could be cool, thinking about different combo timings and stuff that are really mechanically difficult for the opponent to deal with. That's a pretty good one. Bane drop here, Bane drop there. Playing Feint at the front. Have you seen the movie Revolver with Jason Statham?
I haven't. Is it good?
It's really good. It has a lot of dialogue about the ego and the psychology of competition and strategy. And he talks a lot about giving the opponent something they think that they can control because they're smarter and you're dumber. And a lot of times they really fixate on stuff like that of, oh, well, look at this Zerg. They just lost like 12 links at the front for nothing, just poking, and they can't break me with that. And then your Banes go into multiple probe lines while they're basically patting themselves on the back for how much smarter they are than you. When we're very predictable in that sense of we want to feel good about our ability and we want to beat people and feel like we're better players and that kind of stuff. So feeding that a little bit as a distraction mechanism to bonk them somewhere else.
That's actually
something I haven't
so
really
cool.
thought about too much.
I have never thought about that in terms of StarCraft, but it's so on point. I mean, we've all done it where you're like, well, this guy's a bit of a dummy. Like, what is this guy thinking? Like something just that's so unusually silly. And it's like clearly not just a mistake, misclick, but you're like, you're an idiot. You're doing something dumb. And then like we do fixate on it. I catch myself doing it sometimes, like, this guy's an idiot. And
Idra was the key case of that. Where he would never respect his opponents and they would do a bunch of stuff that he considered to be suboptimal. And that would cause him to lose his focus, and he would focus on how suboptimal that was rather than thinking 2 steps ahead. Because if you think, all right, my opponent is a genius and a mastermind, then a lot of times they'll do something like that on purpose. And I should expect that there's some trick up their sleeve that I need to prepare for, and I need to create my own advantages fast and take it very seriously. Because with gaming culture, we have that as kind of our history, right? It's like the best players in the world in Wings of Liberty, we're talking about how bad their opponents are. So we think that that's an acceptable way to think about your opponent, which really bites you in the ass a lot of times.
It does, doesn't it? It's really it's funny, right? Because you want to try and use your ego, our ego and our passion, our urge to be the best and to be better. It's part of our motivation. It is, and it's you can't completely detach yourself from your ego, and you also I don't think you want to, right? You want to have that passion to just be better. There's this competitive drive in us as humans that's, I guess you could argue, evolutionary. I think you could very easily argue that, to beat the other humans so that we have the, whether it's the mating rights or the food source or whatever, right? And we should tap into that, but you want to control it. And there's a fine line between, you know, getting motivated and getting G'd up and playing sick and and getting cocky and not respecting our opponents and underestimating them and not using our head, right?
You want the Bruce Lee quote?
Bring it.
Use the ego as a tool and do not be used by the ego or blinded by it.
My man, you've always got the best quotes. And that's exactly it. That is the most simple way you could put it as well. Bruce Lee is a genius. And that's exactly it. Control your ego. Doesn't mean trying to shut out all emotional responses, which I have seen a lot in the StarCraft community where people are like, nope, I don't even feel happy when I win. And I'm like, what? No, you should. No, you can still feel happy and feel confident and stuff, and you know, you can still feel the pain when you lose. It's just about not letting that pain or that excitement and joy, whether it be from winning or the losing side, dictate everything with how you approach the game. You know, bit of head, bit of heart, bit of both. Awesome, man. This has been really cool. So I wrote a little key points thing at the top of the document. Key points, 2 minutes to 15 to 2 minutes 20 is the core spinning. Stargate branch, Robo branch. These are the two separate builds, separate branches, which you identify what matchup you're playing at that moment, nice and early, okay? Now, keep defining anything that isn't set in stone. I think there's little things like what popped into my head is, I think of the Robo Twilight branch, we didn't define when your Baneling Nest goes down, right? Because we're going roaches early, right? So maybe you need to write, okay, Baneling Nest goes down at the same time as Hydra Den or something like that, right? Maybe there's little things you'll find, but just make sure you're really disciplined on being like, let's not just, oh yeah, I know when that is. Write it down so that your brain really memorizes it, and write it down in your build so it really like slides into your build and gets remembered. And refine the builds, perhaps maybe an empty custom game once a day before your stream. Say, I'm about to click live. Let's hop in and just for 6-7 minutes, practice my Stargate branch or my Robo branch. And doing that just to help you make sure you can do it with no distractions. Likewise, maybe treat your first few ladder games like you're playing AI, where you're you're just seeing what branch it is and you're focusing more on doing your build perfectly. And if because of that, you're not watching and 2 Adepts shade in and kill 6 drones, don't stress over it, because as long as you're cementing your memory of the order you're meant to be doing things, you'll speed up your improvement. Cool.
Sweet. This seems like a pretty good wrap-up point. Lots of stuff to work on for the opening. If we can get the first 10 minutes really solid, then I feel like there are a lot of games where you can just beat people up.
Exactly.
The Hydra Bane stuff.
Yeah, it's we want some of those easy wins.
Thank you, David Kim.
Look at the way Cyril wins some of his tournament games, right? It's just like he's just that much better with a lot of the early details. Sometimes he just bops people. A lot of the time he just bops people, and we want to have some of that ourselves as well. Luckily, we're not playing pro gamers too much on the ladder. But yeah, it should be awesome, man. So enjoy the rest of your stream, the rest of your day, and have a good one.
Cool. Well, I'll probably wrap up here, so I'll just give you a host. Why not?
My man, thank you so much.
Thanks for your time, bud.
Have a good night, man.
Go get 'em.